religion courses being taught in schools in Ontario?
In public? Like, so you have the Catholic system, so it's a separate system, and the public system. Are you asking about the public system?
In the public system.
Okay. Yeah, so in the public system, you just have a world religions course, so it's basically an elective in grade 11, I believe. So that is the only actual class that's relative to religion. But in areas such as Toronto or Ottawa that are very multicultural, you need to have religious space. Now, for students who are Jewish, who are Muslim, not necessarily who are Christian, because it's mostly the Muslim faith that where they need to pray, so they need areas to pray. There was actually a school where I believe it was no, it's not in the Catholic school. Anyway, there was a school in Ottawa where the students, some Islamic students, were found praying in the stairwells. So they created a space for them to pray in a public school, which is really breaking through the norm of like no religious education in schools.
Do you guys think that there should be religion education in public schools?
I think that it's a good idea. I mean, in terms of religion and spirituality, like especially in Canada and Ottawa and Toronto, because it's so multicultural. I mean, fostering an understanding that different religions can coexist with one another. I mean, there are different rules for each religion, but essentially, like the major tenets of them follow the same lines, right? So, not so much to instruct towards or to gear a whole curriculum around religion like the Catholic School Board does, but in the public school board, I think that it probably would be a good idea to incorporate some kind of a general understanding that different kinds of religions are okay, right? There shouldn't be bias against any one particular religion. There might be some difficulty there in terms of, Islam is kind of interesting with the two different factions there, and how they tend to butt heads a lot, but I think that developing some kind of a peaceful coexistence and encouraging that kind of thing, starting from a younger age, would lead to a lot more acceptance.
I agree with you. In public schools, I think there should be that sort of overall religion course, just to teach tolerance and to teach sort of an open mind. But I think we should really pay attention to the difference between teaching faith in schools and teaching religion in schools. And the fact that some public schools have spaces for religious practices kind of goes against the secularism of what a public space is supposed to be. So I just find that it's very contradictory.
So just going back to what you and Mike said, I agree. And I think especially in a multicultural society, I think it's a great way for people to come together and to share their background. And it exposes students that have never been exposed to different ways of thinking and beliefs. And I think it's important for people to see these different ways and to see that we're more similar than we are different. And that should be the goal of it. And I also think that it should be like spirituality oriented, and it could be even meditation and just periods to let that spiritual part of students develop under students' well-being.
See, I disagree with that, because you're teaching them a certain way, like spirituality, like that's very personal choice. Mm-hmm. And I agree with teaching them about spirituality and about meditation, but not actually instructing a meditation course.
Okay, like it wouldn't just be that, but it could be a component and more exposing people to seeing different things and just a like more from a learning to deal with stress, more of a relaxation, like getting your mind calm down. Like I understand what you're trying to say.
I think the overarching idea is that so that you provide an opportunity for different faith-based religions or spiritualities to coexist within a public school. Instead of having a segregation. So in the Catholic system, which is all I know because that is where my experience lies within the Catholic schools. So within a Catholic school, you have multi-faiths, you have multi-spiritualities. Not everybody is Catholic. Mm-hmm. In a public system, you have even a greater diversity. So within that, you're not segregating. So Islamic people need to pray at certain times of the day. So incorporating that within the public school allows them to still attend, where if you just disallow that, then they have nowhere to go except for their private schools where they do not receive funding for.
I think it's also interesting because in the like a major difference between the Catholic board and the public board is that the Catholic faith actively shapes some of the curriculum in different areas, right? Like I suppose the most obvious and easily understood example is sex education, right? In Catholic schools, they teach, abstinence. Thank you. Yeah. So they teach abstinence as what you should be practicing, and then it's if you don't stick with abstinence, then these are the things can happen, and it's like hellfire and brimstone on you if you decide that you want to have sex before you're married.
No, it's not.
Not,
it's
not,
not. And that's not how
far,
it's taught in the Catholic Church either. That's like a stereotypical idea coming from outside the Catholic Church.
I know, but just thinking in terms of I am in the Catholic Church, but to compare that.
I know, but the
to
idea of
the
hell
other,
and brimstone is a very medieval thing that is ideal that still is pervasive in our society, but it shouldn't be brought forth into the field of education or even within this discussion.
Okay. But if we strike that from the record then, just to say that, in sex ed, it's taught in a particular way in the Catholic faith, that it's not as inclusive as it is in the public system, right? And I think that it's more important that it be inclusive as it is in the public system because it's unrealistic to expect that kids who are faced with the amount of sexuality that's in society right now, even if you are Catholic, are going to be able to, try to resist that. It's there's just so much social pressure on it. But so just to say that having a specifically Catholic faith-based curriculum is not the best idea in terms of trying to educate the number of different faiths that are in the school, because if there are contradictory ideas about what's appropriate, then all of a sudden you're excluding people who don't fit that mold in that education system, right? And I think that's very important if you're thinking about introducing faith to a public system and getting rid of the Catholic system, is that the focus should be inclusionary instead of exclusionary, right? So that people don't feel like if they're in this system and they're being taught particular things, it's being shaped by a particular viewpoint. And so, almost what we were saying about, having a course to teach meditation, I agree with Natasha that it's not a great idea, but to include curriculum that would present that as being a method of dealing with something, or spirituality is this, right? Let's talk about what it means to be spiritual. Let's talk about what faiths mean. Let's talk about, similarities and differences between them, but we're not allowing those similarities and differences to actually shape the content of the material that's getting across, right? It's got to be, as a teacher, you have to teach from an objective viewpoint if you're going to give your kids the best, experience in terms of what it is that they're doing. So I guess that's kind of what I'd like to say about that, is the Catholic faith kind of doesn't, it just changes things to make it work, right? To try to propagate itself almost. Not to a major degree, but it does change.
No, I don't think it does in any degree. Because, the Catholic school systems I don't think it's teaching exclusion. And by no means is that its viewpoint. It's not trying to propagate. It's not trying to create followers. So what is taught in the religious education program within Catholic schools in terms of sexuality, if you want to bring it back into there, is abstinence. So they aren't permitted to give condoms to their students. Are you allowed to have conversations in class? Absolutely. You can talk about homosexuality. You can talk about same-sex marriage. That's an open discussion. That's open to critical thought. But the main objective is abstinence. And then, do all Catholic students abstain? No. Are they made to feel badly? No. Because that is a pillar of the Catholic Church that has a lot of controversy stemming from the 70s. So that, I think what happens with sexuality is it's just the culture that we live in, that we're just hung up on these ideas. Like the fact that we're talking about right now faith-based schools, and now we're just bringing it back to sexuality, and what does that mean when it's just so small and really is nothing. So to bring it back into that, I think you're getting away from what the actual holistic value of faith-based education is, whether it's public or separate.
Okay, I understand that. I was just saying sexuality as an example, right? In terms of it shouldn't be taught with that one end game in mind, right? Abstinence shouldn't be the goal of what's taught to the students. It should be safe sex, responsible sex, relationship oriented, right? How can
But when you're in
partner?
a Catholic school, that's the whole, so that's the difference. When you're in a Catholic school, you can't argue for safe sex, using condoms, using contraceptives, because that is a value that's grounded within that. And even though the teachers may be very progressive and are outside of that, they, or the priests, or whoever's part of the institution, because it's been declared, either you get that, you stay within the curriculum, or you're essentially a heretic. You may not be labeled as one, but you will lose your job.
That's the exact point that I was making to start offering it in
Yeah, so that's
sexuality,
it, that's not like, that's a question of not faith-based school, not public school, that's the Catholic school in its entirety. So do we need a Catholic school?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.